Vince, let's talk a little fishing with you first.
Sure.
Your charter, Thrillseeker. Just tell folks about that, where you charter out of, and what it's like going on out for a day
Well,
with you.
I'm entering my 41st season. Love it just as much as day one. It's an absolutely riveting fishery. It changes so much day to day, and it's so interesting to watch the different classes of fish go through. And I personally believe it's a tackle manufacturer's dream because I believe every generation of salmon has different eyes, and we see trends based on watercolor, but they're not always the same. And you never get bored chasing those fish. And along the way, we've got trophy brown trout, we've got big lake trout, we've got beautiful steelhead. And then, of course, we got the three salmon species driven by king salmon, Chinook salmon, which are the most popular fish in the Great Lakes. And then coho salmon are always a blast to catch and great table fare. And then we do get into some really big Atlantic salmon too on occasion. So they add some frosting to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been doing it full time for about 38 years, but I started my business late in 1984. And now here we are.
Yeah, that's crazy. 40 years on Lake Ontario. Just tell me a little bit about how the lake has evolved in those 40 years and what you see now that maybe you didn't see back in 1984.
It's a great question. I would have to say that when I got started, there was never a question of watercolor. Watercolor was very pea green, and it was in a lot more uh, acres of the lake than what it is today. Now, there was a conscious effort to clean that up because it was a little too fertile. A lot of organics in the water. Nothing was really being done by runoff, phosphorus, things like that. It's my understanding that we're at the perfect spot right now. We don't want to get any less fertile. We don't want less organics in the water because between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie that feeds Lake Ontario, we got a really nice food chain. You know, there's enough food coming in the lake through the different tributaries, but also the Niagara River comes out of Lake Erie. We have a very large population of alewives, which is what feeds most of our fish. So we're not looking to change that, but what it did change was you can't always find that colored water. So some days that's where it's going to hold the bait. It's going to draw the predators. But there are days where you have to fish clear water, and you have to know how to do that because you will encounter prey fish in that as well as in the colored water. And that's probably the biggest change is day to day. There's times when if you find that water and it just moved a few miles, the same fish that you had the day before will be there. There's other times where the lake completely flips, and sometimes the fish will move with that water, and other times they're not going anywhere, and you just got to adjust to the colder water, clearer. I would say clarity is one of the single biggest factors in how spooky the fish are. So that you go to more stealthier presentations where if you got murky water, you can get away with a lot more. Fish will be more aggressive. They feel like they need to get that meal before another competitor. But when it's crystal clear, they know pretty much everything that's going on. They can see individual bait fish. They can see the other predators and how far away they are. So they're just right off the bat. They know they're in trouble from overhead because where these fish are native, they get picked off from the air sometimes. So that's really what makes them more spooky when you get clarity.
Yeah. You're what, about 15, 20 miles from where the Niagara dumps into the lake. So you get some of that Niagara plume. It's somewhat subdued by the time it gets to you, but you're getting that Niagara plume. You're getting that color in your water. How does that affect how you fish on a day-to-day basis?
So, where I live and where I run my business from is based on consistency. The Niagara River is a major drawing card. But at the same time, we get to a point every season where it's actually repels fish because it'll get too warm. There'll also be big blooms of algae and weeds and things like that you got to contend with. I like to think that we're in a happy medium where we're at, so that we can always tap into that fertility where it's going to hold bait fish, which will draw predators. But yet we're not so close to the mouth of the river where, you know, we're overwhelmed with warm water or a big batch of weeds coming down constantly from Lake Erie. You get wind up on Lake Erie, a lot of times it'll break weeds free and they'll come down the river. So we very much have the flow out front. It may not be in the same location from shore that you get when you're at the mouth of the Niagara, or even Wilson for that matter, which is about 5 miles to the west of us. But that flow is still there, very strong. And I heard one of your guests yesterday, Rick Ijecki, said he thinks he's still in the very tail end of the flow. I agree with that. I fished several years out of Oak Orchard, and I believe that it even influences as far as the oak.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal.
Yeah. Tell me about, what your program looks like if you're going to go fishing. Let's say you and I are going to go fishing in late June. What does that program look like if we're going to go after king salmon?
Late May and June?
Yeah.
Late May and June, we're typically in a little bit of a transition period. At least the last few years, if people wanted to look back to the last couple of years, we're getting away from just full-blown Chinook salmon, and we probably are mixing in some coho presentations. So a little bit of lake trout are going to come incidentally because they're all through the column. But we're starting to look a little bit more for coho and steelhead along with the Chinooks. And a lot of times that means moving out from, further from shore, because these fish they'll travel with the water, but the habitat is expanding because of that warm water that's coming in from the Niagara. And sometimes it's just a matter of staying with it. It may be just pushing east. But what typically happens is you get some wind changes, so you can't be 100% perfect on predicting. So we really got to take it year by year. And I like to say that there is no computer program that you can punch into to say, on May 28th, where am I going to be fishing? Right. Because of all the other variables that come in. You might have a huge crop of coho, which we get some contributions from wild hatches. Mm-hmm. So if you got a huge crop of coho and maybe a smaller hatch of Chinooks, that's going to be something you're going to want to look for. And that could change where you're targeting. Not only in the column, how deep, but also, north to south, how much water you're in, and maybe looking for those breaks. And that's where the fish hawk equipment comes in, because we can find the down breaks. Surface breaks will tell you one part of the story, can be very important for steelhead, but those down breaks are very important for the Pacific salmon.
Mm-hmm. So when you're out there fishing like that for multiple species, you've got to have lines in all different spots in the water column. How are you targeting those different spots in the water column?
So the time frame that we just talked about, we're going to have, if there's steelhead around, we're going to have surface lines all the way down to over 100 feet down, because there's enough habitat. What I mean by habitat is temperature that, they're going to be able to drop down from boat pressure. They're going to drop down from boat traffic. So we have to be able to hit that with downriggers. We have to be looking for certain temperatures that are a trend. Some years they're living in ice cold water. Maybe there's a lot of smelt around. Or maybe the traffic's just so heavy that, they're riding a little deeper. But at the same time, there's super active fish that you're going to have to target at 30 feet down. And you're going to want to be fishing the top 30 for coho anyway. Yep. And steelhead can be best caught right on top or even the top 20. So we're going to put most likely inline boards out with those higher presentations. We're going to run dipsy divers. If we're getting a lot of action from the top 20 or 30, we're going to address those differently than if we're just banging kings deeper. We're going to be running magnum divers with wire line. But if we're fishing higher, we're gonna, we may even be running mono divers.
Do you run lead core on those board lines?
Absolutely. Yeah. That time of year, absolutely.
So you're trying to get that thing maybe 20, 30 feet down on your lead core. Correct. Off your boards. And then what kind of leads do you run when you're running your downriggers? How far off your balls are you typically fishing?
So that goes back to our question our original question that you asked about, what do you see?
Mhm.
Water clarity, it's gonna, if I had to guess, it's gonna lag behind a little bit this year because I don't see it being an early spring. I just hope it's a normal spring. And what I mean by that is we'll be banging fish by beginning of April. Last few years, it's been underway by March,
Right.
and especially for trout. So I think it's gonna be a normal spring, and you where how deep we present and the leads we run could be dictated by the watercolor. So if it's already pushing some green water, because Lake Erie's warming up rapidly, and the plankton hatches are occurring, algae blooms, things like that, then the leads are going to average anywhere from 10 to 30 feet on the riggers, and we typically run 10 to 50-foot leads off the lead core. You know, we run our leaders behind, the fish side or the bait side of the lead core. But if you're in that real clear water, stretching it back can make a big difference.
So with that clear water being present, what colors are you kind of keying in on when you're out there fishing?
So what I find is the cleaner the water, the more natural I like to run, with the exception of steelhead and coho always seem to favor loud colors that time of year.
Mhm.
For me, it seems like it changes midsummer, late summer, where they definitely go more to the alewife patterns that are what the salmon are taking. But early in the year, we'll run loud red, loud orange, chartreuses, hot greens, things like that can be just deadly for the steelhead and the coho. And I'd say last 3 to 5 years, we've found even the Chinooks some days favoring those colors. And I think it's a clear water deal. I really do.
Yeah. So let's say we're gonna go fishing with you. What can I expect if I'm gonna go fish, take a day on a charter with you? What's the day gonna be like?
Are we in that period still? Late
Yeah,
May,
yeah.
early June? Um, I would say you're going to expect to see 3 to 4 species. You're going to see Chinook salmon, coho salmon, steelhead, and occasional lake trout.
Mhm.
You may be able to get a bigger catch of lake trout, but it would be at the expense of some of the fish higher in the column. You fish a little bit differently. Generally, you're running really slow for lake trout, but they're still around in good numbers at that time in our area. They do migrate out of there to the east and the west, but because we're on a charter, we're trying to move the rods for everybody. We're gonna go after mass quantities of bites,
Mhm.
and day to day it'll change.
Yeah.
You know,
Do you fish with a mate?
do I fish with a mate?
Yeah,
I do.
yeah.
I do.
What do you look for in a good mate?
I That's changed. That's changed a lot. You know, I can't give up being in the back of the boat, but I will go up at I will go to the wheel at times, take a break,
Mhm.
get reacquainted with all the electronics, what we're doing. I like to believe that I can leave the mate in full confidence with what's going on in the back of the boat.
Mhm.
Anybody that charter fishes full time will tell you one of the big values of having a mate is uh, saving you tackle, because our fish are so fast that if you're up and you're looking at the chart plotter, or you're looking at 2D sonar or whatever, and you're not looking at the rods at that moment, even the most seasoned charter guest may not know what to do when one rips it off the rigger and goes under the boat.
Yeah.
So if that mate has picked it up fast enough on what to do, which is usually alleviate the pressure on the rod, he could save you $10 to $40 worth of gear in a blink of an eye.
Mhm.
So for me, you know, over the course of a season, I think they're well worth it. I think some of them add a lot, being able to chime in the conversations.
Mhm.
So you can sometimes put your head in fishing mode. They'll carry on the conversations about fishing,
Mhm.
happenings in the world, whatever it may be, music.
Mhm.
But they also can avoid, trouble. not only for the gear, but the customers. One of my all-time favorite stories is we had an afternoon trip, and it was a local group. It seems like a lot of my local groups book late, like well once the season begins, and we can offer them some openings later in the season, and we can offer them more choice if they take an afternoon trip. So this particular crew was two grandfathers, and the rest of the six filled out. The six is the maximum. The rest of the six filled out with grandchildren for both of them. And the stuff that went on that day, I'm so glad that I had another person on board to watch, because these guys really looked at it like, wow, we don't have to watch the kids very closely. And that is exactly the opposite. People ask me a lot, how young is too young? How old do they have to be? Hey, that varies on the child. That varies on the amount of time that you want to spend just keeping them out of trouble with fish hooks and rummaging through the baits and stepping in a hatch when we open it. Anything like that, it's got to be on the group, not just the captain and the mate. But this particular day, it was probably a soft 3 to 4 footers. It was coming down, so it was not harsh at all, but enough that this was a real dangerous thing that happened. I look at the electronics on the dash, I turn back, and they had placed a 3-year-old on the back transom.
Yeah.
They just put him there like to take a picture. I, I was like, oh my God, we're in 200 foot of water.
Right.
I mean, use your head here a little bit.
Yeah.
What's your daughter going to say if you come back without her baby?
Yeah.
I was shaken by that. I just for that split second that I looked away, having another hand there. I mean, he was already like, what's going on? What's going on? But yeah, I mean, I personally prefer mates that look out for the catch, safety of the passengers, the welfare of the boat. Every mate I've had that's worth the salt has said, hey, I don't know if you see it, but I think there's a tree sticking out of the water, 300 yards up. Thank you. No, I didn't see it, and we're going to alter course, and we're not going to run it over. And that's priceless. And you've met Nick before.
Yep.
Nick's a licensed captain now. Nick still works with me, but he's going to also start his own business. He has been very good with that. And now I have young Logan. You've met him a number of times, and he's the same way. He just sees things. He's very good on coaching the customers so they can land their fish. It's little things that maybe if their back's turned to me, and maybe I'm going to grab a couple more baits that are firing, and he's watching what they're doing, he might see that they're playing with the drag or something like that, which is taboo.
Right.
But the captain and the mate know best how to get your fish in the boat.
Yeah.